All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Sam Opsahl, and I work with Indiana Humanities as a program associate. And on behalf of Indiana Humanities, I couldn't be more excited to be welcoming our viewers in for this special bonus content from the Waterways film tour. We're very excited and very proud of the Waterways films, both for the conversations that they've sparked and the success they are now finding in the local awards circuit. And I'm very thrilled to be here now and talking with one of the filmmakers. Will, how are you doing today?
Good, Sam. Thanks for having me.
Hey, no problem at all. All right, let's dive into the questions then. So, question one, where did the idea or inspiration for your film come from? Cast out.
Uh, I was raised on the north side of Indianapolis, like north of Broad Ripple and south of Nora. And I remember sitting in the back of my mom's minivan and driving like down towards Broad Ripple. And this was before the Monon Trail was like a trail. It was still, I think they were probably building it at that point, but I remember driving over all those bridges as you go kind of south on Westfield and are headed towards Broad Ripple. I remember going south, going across those bridges and seeing cars like sedans parked on the side of the road, and the trunks would be popped, and people had coolers and fishing poles.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing that, and just as a young person, like kind of being struck that, of course, I have like growing up in Indiana, like my uncles and grandfathers would go on these big fishing trips, and on Thanksgiving, they like have long beards and be talking about how, like we were just up in Canada and we saw the Northern Lights and caught fish that were this big. So in my mind, it was like, that's fishing. That's what, it's like people do fishing. It's like they would eat the fish as well, but it was also kind of a sport and sort of a bonding thing or whatever. And, but I remember seeing these people who had these sedans with their coolers and fishing poles, very like modest fishing poles, marching down to the river and catching things, presumably to put those fish into that cooler and take them home and feed their families, right? And so when a filmmaker friend brought the Indiana Humanities like RFP to me, I immediately thought of that. I immediately thought of those people who fish on these rivers and these waters in our city. Like these are urban, people fish for consumption to eat. And at the time when I put together my proposal to Indiana Humanities, I was living at around 25th and Talbot, just north of downtown. And we were right on like the Fall Creek Trail. And so I used to walk that trail with my daughter and my dog quite a bit. And around that time, I was thinking like, man, I know that there are people who live in this city because I've also seen them downtown. We would walk on the Cultural Trail downtown, and I would also see them on the Fall Creek Trail, kind of dipping, underneath bridges to go and fish and kind of do the same thing. And I was like, I want to meet these people, right? And then at the same time, I do a fair amount of commercial work, and I was doing something for this company, Cliff Bar, make like kind of like granola bar types of things. And say again.
So I've eaten way too many of those.
Yeah. And I was doing like a commercial for them, and was interviewing. So Indianapolis and Indiana specifically has like one of the largest populations of Burmese immigrants in the U.S. And at that time, I was doing this commercial interviewing these Burmese immigrants, and I was talking to one of them after an interview, and he was saying that he was living. He said he had like 7 roommates or something like that in an apartment. And I was like, oh, wow, do you guys like cook for each other, or, like how do you handle food and things? He said, actually, in the apartment complex, there was a pond that the apartment complex presumably had built, when they built that complex. And he said, we go out and we fish that and then bring it back and make these big dinners that we all kind of split. I was like, that is beautiful. That's amazing. I love, like, my entry point as a filmmaker often is the people. I'm so interested in characters, right? I'm actually not even interested in story or themes. It's really about characters, because I believe once you get in with any character, like everybody has a story. And so I want to dive in and dig deep and find out what those stories are. But ultimately, for me, my interest is character and circumstance, and the circumstances that ultimately reflect our characters and the choices that we make. And so that's, sorry, long story is to say all of those things kind of added up to this idea where I was interested in documenting people who fish on the cities in Indianapolis's rivers and waters for consumption. So that was my entry point. That was the idea. But I made this film with a very, very small team. It was pretty much just me and a cinematographer and co-director friend, Colton Dallas.
Okay.
And we would go out, and what we decided very early on is we're going to treat this film like we're fishing. Because a big part of I didn't have a character, for example, going into this, like when I proposed this idea. I had everything I just told you, but a big part of documentary, and like I said, a big part for me is my entry point is character, right? And I started reaching out to people. I reached out to Cliff and met somebody there, and ultimately was able to film with him. And he's featured at the end of the film with one of his friends. We go out fishing with him. But I wanted to meet other people who were involved in consumptive fishing and the health of the water and things like this. Uh, uh, you know, naturally and organically. And so what we ultimately did is Colton and I would go out with our camera, and basically we spent almost an entire year. It was almost a full calendar year of fishing for people. And we would go out, and we met a number of people that are not featured in the film because it just didn't fit. The energy didn't feel right, I guess. Like the inspiration wasn't there in terms of what it is what our entry point was, which was these people who fish, like for consumption. We met sport fishing people and just a lot of people who would also hang out on the river, and it was an incredible experience. But yeah, again, it was kind of like we were treating it like we were fishing as well, and so that's why our film is kind of feels that way. I think it's kind of this linear thing where people sort of emerge, from the city to the water.
I love that. I never put those pieces together, but now it fits perfectly in my mind. I didn't plan on saying either of these points I'm about to make, but when I grew up on the south side of Indy, and whenever we needed to drive into downtown, we'd take Bluff slash like west into downtown, and along the White River, I would see the same things growing up. And so that was like a visual I was very used to seeing in the city. So seeing somebody capture that on film was like that was really profound for me. So that was very cool. And by the same token, growing up on the south side, I played soccer in high school growing up, and I was by no means good at soccer. But one of the more impactful experiences I had playing soccer in high school was the people I interacted with, and a lot of folks I played with were Burmese immigrants on the south side of Indy, and so I've always known that's a population in Indy, and that's part of my Indianapolis experience. But again, I've rarely seen that captured and something people can engage with. So again, seeing both of those in the film, that was really important to me, and I'm sure that's important to a lot of other people too. So thank you for doing that. I appreciate that.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, yeah, of course. Okay, enough about me. I'm digressing a little bit. You've kind of already touched on this, but there other processes that came from making the film that you want to talk about or analyze? So, like the filming, editing process. What did that look like for you? Again, you've already talked about this a little bit, but if there are other elements of the filmmaking process you'd like to go into, like now's the perfect time to do that.
Cool. Um, yeah, I mean, I'll go back and just reiterate that we treated the process like we were fishing. It was just me and one other person. I mean, I think that's one thing to definitely take away from our film is I think it's really important, that process is a reflection of what it is you're trying to achieve. That they're in community together, right? The technical process and the goals that you're trying to achieve, right? The story that you're trying to tell. Okay. And so our film is absolutely a reflection of that. It's very meditative. It's very much the energy that we found when we arrived at these places. We started with a much larger camera package when we first went out. I actually started out going out by myself in the winter a lot of the times. So there's a lot of like snow and just frozen water. And, my goal, like I said, was to meet people. Nobody was out. Like nobody was out in the winter, and it was a brutal winter. Yeah, it was very, very cold. There were a number of times where it was like, I would be sitting in my warm house thinking, I don't want to walk the mile or whatever to get to the water that I know that I want to shoot, but the snow is so beautiful right now, and it's 6 a.m. Let's go, like let's
Yeah,
just do this.
do it for the
But
shot.
yeah, yeah, exactly. But then once I was out there, my toes were freezing, and again, there's a number of things that I filmed that ultimately didn't make the film, but the experience of making the film is all in there. And it's all, again, a reflection of the tone, of what we were trying to achieve. So anyways, they're all, going back to, I believe the technical and the storytelling are, there's an interplay between them. And so in terms of technically what we did, we shot it mostly on a red Komodo. I believe that's right. I believe that's the name of the camera.
Okay.
And Canon lenses, and then sometimes Zeiss super speed lenses. And then I edited the film, and tried to treat, I tried to treat the edit with the same kind of energy that the film met us in real life. So it's very meditative. It's linear, like just like we shot it. And that wasn't always the intention, but that's what we found. That's what we discovered. And so yeah, and I don't know if I mentioned this, but like fishing again, going out and trying to discover, it's sort of like we were going out to cast our line, and whatever it is that bites, the whatever nibbles, that's when we would pull back. That's when we would, kind of tug to see what we catch, and we met some interesting people along the way, and also just found some incredible nature. I mean, I think that was the biggest thing coming out of this, is how much, I would walk along the Fall Creek Trail, and it's beautiful, right? But people would pass on their bikes, and like there are buildings going up right there, and there's a house being repaired or torn down or whatever, that if you step 30 feet that way, just cut through the trees, push a bush out of the way and stand on that river, you feel like you're completely isolated. And there were a number of times where we'd be out there for hours and never see a soul. Could hear cars passing behind me, but I wouldn't see anybody. At one point I saw a bald eagle, and I'm like,
Oh
I'm
my God.
50 feet from the road. These aren't things that you normally see when you're just in your car, because we're such a car city and just driving everywhere we go, and or if we walk, it's the intention of let's go for a walk, not to get someplace, and to just go be present with nature, the nature that is right here in our city. It was pretty incredible.
That's so cool. How so kind of then bouncing off of that, you're talking about all these processes being in community with each other. I like that phrase a lot. How do you then see like the connections being made between storytelling and this idea of it, our relationships with the environment as Hoosiers, or people in general? So you're already kind of touching on that, but are there any other connections you want to kind of highlight and how you made those connections?
That's a great question. I don't feel like I have a great answer for you. I mean, I can only speak to, I'm just like a vessel, I guess. I don't know if that's the best word for it, but I feel like I'm just channeling. I'm just channeling what comes to me. All I can do is be present and be open to whatever comes to me, right? Or whatever, or put myself in a place, like step in the way of the path of something, put my foot in the river, and so as it goes by, whatever's flowing downstream, that's what it is that I find, and I pull that out of the water. That's all I could do, And I believe that in general in filmmaking, and I believe that especially literally in the film that we were making, But in terms of like, yeah, I don't know, like the storytelling of us as Hoosiers and things like that. I know that there are a lot better people who can write and tell big messages and themes and ideas in terms of like great, stories and things like this. That's not how I think. I think in terms of character. I think in terms of humanity, and our connection to nature. I believe we are all, again, in community together. And so all I can do is just be part of that and just be a vessel to help communicate that in the way that from my perspective, it's inherently objective, because I'm just telling my version of what it is that I feel, and I'm just trying to reflect whatever it is that I find,
Yeah, I think that's perfect. I love that idea of like, and I've seen that through my work a little bit this year of like the beaten path is just like just off of the main road there kind of thing. Like all you gotta do is kind of pull a tree aside and then you're seeing bald eagles and seeing this river there. So like,
Yeah.
yeah, I think like that idea of what we as the self can explore as rather than as just as a community, words are hard, is really powerful. Thank you for
Yeah.
sharing that.
Mm.
Okay, so you already talked about some of the characters that you had in your film. Do you have any updates for them? How are they doing? Where are they at? Or any updates to the story you've kind of documented along the way?
No, I mean, I don't. I wondered if you're going to ask me that. And, I think that's what's really interesting. If you've seen my film, or after you
Mhm.
watch this and watch my film, you'll see that um, as much as my entry point is character, a big part of this film, which isn't always the case with me. I mean, I've done other films which are extremely, almost in an opposite way, very character driven, and I can give you updates on all those people because I
Yeah.
was so embedded with them. This was very much like passing, like I'll keep saying this. It was like we stood at the side of the river, and whatever passed us, whatever floated down river, we picked it up out of the water, right? We said, that's how that makes me feel. Put it on film and then placed it back in the water and let it continue on. And so with that being said, I haven't chased it. I haven't run back downstream to be like, oh, thing, how are you, or whatever, or the people or the characters or anything like that. So again, just the process is very much a reflection of the film that ultimately came out. So no, I mean, it was that year that we spent making this film was very isolated and very contained. We tried to be as objective as possible,
Okay.
and observational, and yeah.
Kind of.
Hopefully that answers your question.
No, 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 that's perfect. And like kind of maybe bouncing off of that, like I know you were talking about how this one is much more impressionistic. Was that something
Yeah,
you went in with the intention of doing? Because I know you've said you
yeah.
focus on character a lot, or is this something kind of new to you as well?
It was new to me. It was definitely new to
Oh,
me.
that's
I mean, it
awesome.
was like, again, I'll go back to this idea of like we went fishing. That's how we thought of it. And so, in order to reflect that, I just recognized pretty early on that I can't dig in when you fish. Yeah, of course, like you have to sit there and be patient, but there are often times when you miss on these bites. So this was very much a new process for me, and I learned a lot. But it was a journey. It was about seeking and finding.
Uh, That's amazing. That's the kind of stuff I get excited about. So hopefully the audience gets excited about it too.
Uh,
So kind of two quick wrap-up questions for you then. When you're thinking about like the life of the film now that it's out in the world, like how have you been engaging with folks, or how do you feel like folks have been engaging with the movie? And then like have you been touring it around? Like have you been taking it on the film circuit? Like what's the life of the film been like for you?
Yeah, the response has been really interesting. I think one of my favorite things about filmmaking, and maybe this is, as anybody that's a maker or creator of any kind, right? One of the most interesting parts is you do the thing, whether it's with your team or completely isolated, however you do it, right? You do the thing in your own space, in your own
Mhm.
isolated space, and then you take it, and whether or not you have intentions, you take it to other people, and they have to be, they will meet it wherever they are, right?
Yep.
So whatever your intentions are or your intentions aren't is almost irrelevant to the way that people find it. Okay. And
Yep.
that's been a really interesting thing about this film is uh I didn't have, it doesn't say much. It's not a documentary in the traditional sense of here is, the facts. Here is the story that's happening in that sense, right? It's much more impressionistic. Okay. So that's how we presented the film. And so your impression of it and the audience's impression of it ultimately is, what I end up hearing. And the impressions have been confused sometimes. I think people get caught sometimes in this idea of like, it's not telling me what to feel, it's
Mhm.
not telling me what to say, what to think, what actually is the fact, right? So we have this scene, for example, where there's a group of people who test the water, and they test for certain chemicals, and they actually go fishing, but they fish with this like pole, and at the end of the pole there are these electrodes that go down into the water,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
they
yeah.
sit at the end of a canoe, and they drag it through the water, and it stuns the fish. And then
Mhm.
the fish float to the top, and they grab the fish and put them in a bucket, and they're trying to get a certain segment of the population. They want to make sure they're getting small fish, different types of fish, big fish, whatever. Then they take it back to their shop, and they fillet them, and they send them off to get tested, and that's how they can send out like advisories for whether or not it's safe for us to consume that water or the fish that are in that water in that area. Uh, I don't say a lot about that in the film. I show that, and that's it. Okay. And then we show these two men who are fishing to presumably take that fish back and eat it, right? Uh, the connection is there inherently because we put them next to each other in the film, but
Hmm.
we don't say anything about they then, this fish that they sent out came back and it had, really high amounts of lead in it. And then this guy went and fished in that spot. And now he's eating the fish with the lead in it. There's nothing about that. So whether or not those are connected is only in the sense that they're connected in the film. So this is all just to get back to, I'm sorry if I'm a little bit wordy, it's all to get back to, you asked about how people are kind of like meeting the film, what's the life of the film. I think that people find that difficult sometimes, and that's been really interesting. I actually enjoy that. I enjoy that conversation.
Yeah.
A big part of the prompt from Indiana Humanities was let's spark conversations, right? And so
Yeah.
that was my thought the whole time is, well, I'm not going to tell you what to think then. I'm gonna make you feel something or present some ideas, and then let's talk about it. Let's spark some conversation. So that's been an incredible part of the process. And with that being said, I'm so excited for these films to be released, digitally, where we can reach, anybody,
Even
everybody,
more.
and
Yeah.
have even more of these conversations. And my hope is that, they do spark conversations, that it's not, I'm not trying to say any, it shouldn't be one way in either direction. I'm not trying to give you my facts or my opinions or anything like that. I'm trying to present something, and I want you to come back and let's have a conversation. Let's continue the dialogue. And I'm excited to talk more about it. And I know Indiana Humanities is as well.
Yeah.
And then hopefully people will see this and have conversations with their friends and with their family, and it'll open Hoosiers' eyes a little bit.
Absolutely. I love that. All right, final question for you then. What's next? And I guess I'm cheating again. It's a two-part question, but what's next for the film and what's next for you?
So the next thing for this film is, yeah, I mean, we're releasing it online, and that's excited for it to have that life. I mean, the internet democratizes everything, including film. So our hope is that that doesn't mean that it's lost out into the ocean, but actually that as this river, as this tributary, opens up into bigger waters, that people find that water. What's next for me? I'm always making things. I mean, if you know me, I'm always pushing. So I'm actually releasing a short film right now, another film that Colton Dallas and I, a filmmaking partner of mine, we shot it at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway at the Indy 500. I've always been interested, actually, in a very similar. I mean, if you feel drawn to Cast Out, this feels very much in the same language. Actually, what we made there. It's more focused on the people, I would say, and less the environment. But with that being said, I've always been interested in, again, growing up in Indianapolis, especially being close to downtown, nearish the west side or nearish downtown. It feels like on the day that the Indy 500 happens, the gravity of the whole city shifts, and everything feels like it's just kind of like falling downhill towards the speedway. So
Yep.
I've always been interested in that and wanted to do something around that. So we kind of took our cameras to the motor speedway and faced them out. So you don't see any racing in this
Oh
film.
my
It's
God.
all about the people. It's all about the people who are coming in towards, again, these are rivers, these tributaries, these
Yeah.
rivers coming in towards this lake. And we didn't point the camera at the lake like everybody else was. We turned the camera around. And so we're
It's
actually releasing that this week. So presumably by the time this interview's out, people will be able to see that. And then I'm also in post-production on another documentary that we did around another Hoosier Indianapolis environment, which is the Indiana State Fair.
Mhm.
And another character kind of thing, where it's sort of the environment and the characters that are around that environment. And then I also have I do a fair amount of narrative kind of fictional work as well, and I have a couple of shorts that are coming out. One that's just coming off the festival circuit, so similar to this, we'll be able to finally release it online. And
Go.
yeah, a few things, a number of things.
I'm excited for you. What for the 500 one that's about to be out in the world? Where's the best place for us to watch that, or where's it going to live at? I guess I should say.
So I'll post it both on Instagram. I think Instagram is incredibly powerful now. I'll post the full film there.
Okay.
I believe it's 9 minutes. I'm at Wertz Works, WERTZWORKS.
Okay.
So we'll post it on there, and then also on my YouTube. If you the name of the film is going to be Edge of June, EDGEOFJUNE. Yeah,
Awesome. Okay. Well, I'll be for sure tuning in, as I'm sure other people will as well. So,
appreciate
Will,
it,
thank
Sam.
you so much for joining me. I appreciate you doing this.
Thank you, Sam. Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
No problem at all. And for everybody else watching, on behalf of myself, Will, and the entire team here at Indiana Humanities, I do want to thank everybody for tuning in for this interview. It's been a blast. And if you're interested in watching and learning more, please make sure to check out the remaining films and interviews on the Indiana Humanities YouTube channel. Lastly, couldn't finish this moment off without thanking the Joe and Carol Trimmer Indiana Film Fund, as well as the Nina Mason Pulliam Charitable Trust. They were huge supporters of this project. Thanks again for tuning in, everybody, and have a great rest of your day.